Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with David Frank. We're talking national political news of the day, and we're getting to the final lap of the Trump hush money trial. Shouldn't be called the hush money trial, should be called the falsification of documents trial. But the matter has been handed to the jury. We heard closing arguments on actually really should be called summation on Monday, and Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
Monday was a holiday, and then this morning the judge spent about an hour reading jury instructions. That's a little bit longer than average. Usually it's about a half hour to 45 minutes in my experience, but jury instructions take a while, and yeah, they've got to be listened to, and it's really hard because there's a lot of instructions. And then the jury went out to deliberate, and they have made several requests, including a rereading of the jury instructions, which is very interesting. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to first talk about I'll just real briefly comment on the closing arguments, and why Trump might want to be a little concerned here. Is the closing arguments, of course, the prosecution focused on Trump and on all of the corroboration witnesses, all of the witnesses that they brought in, and basically tried to make Cohen as a tour guide and said, Cohen is important for these points, but you don't have to like Cohen and you don't even have to believe everything he says, obviously, right? Defense obviously tried to make it all about Cohen. I think they mentioned Cohen, somebody counted like almost 200 times. And they really tried to make it that is the defense. Cohen is a liar. Don't believe Cohen. And didn't really talk all that much about the rest of the case. This is why I'd be concerned if I was Trump, because the jury has asked for for a reading of the transcript, 4 sections of the transcript. Pecker's testimony about his phone conversation with Trump in June 2016. Pecker's testimony about not finalizing Trump's payment to AMI for Karen McDougal's life rights. Pecker's testimony about the August 2015 Trump Tower meeting, and Cohen's testimony about the Trump Tower meeting. This suggests a couple of things. One is they're not rejecting Cohen's testimony out of hand. They obviously want to hear it. They may still reject it, by the way. This is not a guarantee that the prosecution has, gotten over the hump with regard to Cohen's testimony, but they are discussing it. But they're really focused on Pecker and the grab and kill, or catch and kill. Policy of it. They're taking it very seriously. And that's the very first witness. If they do this with every witness, this is going to be a long deliberation. They were out for about 4.5 hours today. And they are asking for this reading. The first, second, and fourth have been read to them. There's a little bit of an argument about which portions may not be read to them about the third one. But they are taking this very seriously, and they wanted it read back to them. And I'm going to hand it off to you because I want to come back. I'll come back to a point later. But Trump said something this morning in social media about how disgraceful it is that the judge is told the jury that they don't have to reach a unanimous verdict. That's not true. He either is deliberately misleading the public or his public, or doesn't understand what he heard. And I'll talk about what that is a little bit later, but I want to hand it off to you.
Excellent. As always, thank you for that setup. I think a couple interesting, I'll kind of mogul ski across the top of the things that stand out to me, and then we'll kind of we can bounce around as you see fit. I think the summation part from yesterday, it's important for folks who maybe didn't get a chance to check it out. The prosecutor gave basically a thorough explanation, and some said it was too thorough, of like the timeline and events, just to refresh people's memory. And he mentioned that the evidence speaks for itself, that you don't actually need to find Cohen credible, that you just really need to listen to, your own, common sense about what the documents mean. And then he went and poked holes through some of the defense claims, because ultimately what the defense was doing was trying to sow seeds of doubt. The defense, that you could tell from their techniques, legal scholars, several different legal scholars have kind of pointed out that the defense really was sort of shotgunning around in their closing statements, just really trying to see if there's anything that would stick in terms of poking holes in evidence, poking holes in assumptions about like what people experienced throughout the trial. But ultimately, I think that the essence, of the case is that it was reimbursement, and not a big paycheck. So if you say to yourself, well, if Trump himself tweeted out, or in an X statement said, use the term reimbursement, right? So if it was a reimbursement, I think the key elements are, the fact that Michael Cohen has already pled guilty to 2 crimes. One causing an unlawful campaign contribution, and 1 count of making an excessive campaign contribution. So that's the payment made to Stormy Daniels. That's the reimbursement. So the jury just has to make that connection that those payments are already factually criminal. So the key elements. Was this about the election, right? The timing of it.
Yes.
Why did they make the payment right before? Why was there a scramble? Why are there texts going back between Trump's staff members about the payment, about the election, about the timing? And then once he won the day after the election, these same people, hey, what did we do? Like, our hush money thing that we did impacted the election, drawing the connection to the election. So that's 1. Was it about the election? 2, were the records fraudulent? Well, if he was just going to make a payment, why didn't he make a payment? If he was directly to Stormy Daniels, why was there this convoluted scheme, right? So what the payments themselves were relabeled as legal expenses. So why do that? And then finally, the most important part. Did Trump cause this? Was Trump the causal agent? Is he the one? And then so there's testimony from David Pecker himself about, we met in the tower and we had the catch and kill and we had this plan with Trump. And then there's testimony from the financial advisor. I forgot his name right now. The head CFO of the Trump organization. He's the one who said, "Hey, I had this meeting," and he was the one who walked over with Cohen into the office and made the arrangements. So if Trump signed the checks, if he's the one who approved the payments, if that scheme, alleged scheme he was the causal agent, then it's an open and shut case basically.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, because we know the payments were made. I mean, they don't have to. The paperwork is there. It's just a question of Trump's connection. Was he oblivious to it, and was it about the election? I mean, that's really what they have to do. I want to point out a couple of things too. Trump's 2 complaints. One was he was ranting that it was shameful that the that the prosecution gets to have the last word. He didn't like that. And of course, as you pointed out, he went on. He took about 5 hours. Well, he would like it even less in California because in California the prosecution gets to go first and last. They get to go first. The defense gets to respond, and then the prosecution gets to go. It's not supposed to be for as long. It's supposed to be a short rebuttal of the defense. Why? That sounds unfair, right? But the prosecution has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, I've only done 1 criminal trial. I'll never do one again. It was early in my career. We didn't really do criminal law, but whenever we got a case from a client that less share, they only wanted less share to handle, and then he'd throw it on my desk. It was, we did this, and I had a criminal trial down in Leggett. One of the tactics that criminal defense attorneys do is you stand up in front of the jury and you feign sympathy. this poor prosecutor has got this incredible burden, this incredible mountain to climb, right? You know, beyond a reasonable doubt, how impossible it is to meet this. And, so to get the jury really thinking about it, I mean, that's why they get to go second, because they've got this incredible hill to climb. So that's why they have it. But Trump doesn't like that. He wants to have the last word, right? And so that's to explain why that is. But of course, MAGA right now feels that's unfair. Then this morning, Trump says that, it's unfair that he instructed the jury that they don't have to reach a unanimous verdict. It's not true. In every state, to reach a criminal verdict, either innocent or guilty, you need a unanimous verdict. Otherwise, it's not true in every state. I'm sorry. There are a couple of states where you can get 9 instead of 12. But in most states, it's unanimous, whether you've got 9 or 12 jurors or whatever. But in New York, he's got to have all 12 jurors, one way or another. What he didn't understand is that the prosecution has to meet each of its elements of the crime. They have to prove that the person they have to prove that the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of a person in public by unlawful means, and they have to be unanimous on that. But they don't have to be unanimous on what that unlawful means were. And the prosecution the prosecution presented 3 theories as to what the unlawful means was: the violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act, the falsification of other business records, or violation of tax laws. So one juror could believe that they did one thing, another juror can believe another. But if that was the unlawful means, as long as it was unlawful means, if they meet the other elements, and they're unified on the fact that there was an unlawful means, they have to be unanimous in that. They don't have to agree on the details of the crime. Just like if you're brought for murder and you shoot and you stab somebody, it doesn't matter whether one juror believes that he was killed by the knife and the other believes that he was killed by the gun. All you have to agree is that he was killed by the individual in this moment. And so that's the analogy here, and that's the way the law has been applied before Trump's trial. It's the way the law will be applied after Trump's trial, and therefore it is the way the law is applied during Trump's trial. But it doesn't sound right to him, and so he goes out and he doesn't check with his own attorneys before he says this kind of stuff. That is not the kind of a temperament or something that you would expect from a responsible person. But again, we're in a new era now where the Speaker of the House shows up and says it's a sham, won't explain how it's a sham, but just says it's a sham. That would have been unheard of at any time before now. And this is where we are, where somebody who could be elected president can misstate the law and millions of people will believe him.
Yeah, I think on that theme about Trump going out there and trying to be the one setting the tone, the communications tone. One of the things that it's been reported that he messaged out was that the trial itself was a kangaroo court, and that it was a fraud. Because he wasn't allowed to make his own. The judge ruled he wasn't allowed to make the defense that he actually wanted to make. That he said, "Hey, I was just following my lawyer's instructions." So he's basically saying that Judge Merchant did not allow the advice of counsel defense, saying this is unprecedented. I can't even just say that my lawyer is the one who gave me this guidance. But the judge actually, when I saw that, I kind of was like, well, maybe I should look into this a little bit. What the judge actually said was that Trump's own legal team said that they didn't want to meet the requirements for making the claim that it was illegal advice, because the judge called it the presence of counsel defense. And Trump's own lawyers didn't want to meet the requirement, the threshold. Here's the threshold: make a complete and honest disclosure to his counsel concerning the matter, that he sought advice regarding the legality of his conduct, that he received advice that his conduct was legal, and that he relied on that advice in good faith. And his own lawyer was like, "We're not doing that because we can't meet that." But Trump, as with other things, he's adjudicating this in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is we'll see how this goes. I don't know if they're going to go through every witness, by the way, but if they're going to spend as much time, and they probably won't spend as much time on every witness. I don't think they're going to spend that much time on Stormy Daniels, for instance. I think they started to lose interest in her at a certain point. I think she was in there for a single point. They may spend a bit of time on Hope Hicks. And the rest, but it's very interesting. They are taking the case seriously. So for a lot of people who thought, oh, this case is over, and there were a lot of people arguing that, even people on CNN, that were arguing this after Thursday's testimony with Cohen, not when things seemed to be going really bad for the prosecution because he was getting tripped up on his words. And a lot of people don't understand this is a sophisticated jury, educated jury. 2 attorneys on it. I'm really surprised 2 attorneys ended on it. But anyway, we will be talking about this probably next week, because I'm wondering if the jury is going to be done deliberating by the time we do our next show. Next subject. There has been a question as to whether or not Joe Biden would be on the ballot in Ohio. Now, after all this screaming about whether or not Trump was going to be on the ballot in Colorado, and how people, even Democrats, were screaming, how could you not have a major party candidate not be on a ballot in any state? The Republicans, well, there was a law there that said that in order for a candidate to be on the ballot, they had to be officially nominated within 90 days. Well, of course, 90 days before the election. Of course, the Democratic National Convention is taking place in August, and apparently it's been causing trouble because it was passed in 2010. And apparently there wasn't whoever is in charge, their Secretary of State, was not going to issue a waiver for Biden. So Joe Biden was not going to be on the ballot in Ohio. And now it's probably Biden has a relatively low chance of winning in Ohio, but not impossible. It's not exactly Indiana or Idaho. So it was a big deal. Now, Biden had been working out, the DNC had been working out a plan to nominate Biden ahead of the convention, since he's obviously got the delegates to do so at this point. But at the last minute, well, not the last minute before this show, the Republicans, without Democratic support, passed a bill that basically gets them on, allows them to be on the ballot. But they also are passing a bill that they were hoping that they could get the Democrats to support, that doesn't allow money from outside the state to be spent on local elections. Well, of course, they have a resolution in there that is going to basically it's one of many abortion issues that would basically either codify or possibly put in the Constitution. I'm not sure which type of bill it is, to basically protect abortion rights in Ohio. Republicans dislike it for two reasons. One is that they don't like abortion, and it's been passing pretty much everywhere, even in states like Kansas. Actually didn't pass there. They rejected a measure that was going to make it a constitutional that against abortion. So they don't want outside money coming in to really push this amendment. They also don't like it because it does increase chances of Democrats in general in Ohio, because it will increase the turnout, particularly of young voters, as it has been, as we've been talking about the Dobbs effect. Every special election since Dobbs has passed, Democrats have outperformed the polls. Whether it would apply to a general election, it's because during the midterm elections, it was a little bit more ambiguous as there were bigger turnouts. It was hard to know what the effect was on some of those races, not all, but some of them. But it will, help Democrats in the turnout, everything else being equal. So they passed that because they don't want a lot of money coming in to basically boost that initiative. So that's the politics of it. It looks like he will be on the ballot. I think the Democrats are going to basically nominate him ahead of time anyway. He's on the ballot in every other state. It looks like Trump is going to be on the ballot in every state. So no more politics about ballot access everywhere. When I first proposed this topic, I didn't know that this was going to be resolved by then, but it was resolved late this afternoon. Steve?
So, yeah, I think that in fact, it's great that we're covering this, because so many times people think that when policies are decided, there's like this T-chart, like these are the pros and these are the cons, and then people deliberate, and then we come up with, hey, this would be the best outcome for the citizens. And of course, we know that's not the case. So then we say, oh, well, there's, it's this side, there's a little bit more power on the majority, a little less power on the minority. And so they have to, do the log rolling where they make promises to each other. But we just kind of say, oh, this is, sort of institutionalized corruption. But in this case, the actual concept, like you alluded to, or you referenced, it's been on the books for a bit. Other states have these same problems. So the problem of Biden and Harris not being on the ballot, while that was the headline, I think that there's really a bigger policy kind of hiding out under the surface, which you mentioned, which is that they had a companion element to this bill. It wasn't just about getting them on the ballot. So let's deconstruct this a little bit. The Ohio Secretary of State said, and this is a quote, that he was duty-bound to instruct the Board of Elections to begin preparing ballots that did not include Mr. Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, basically. So they were saying, hey, sorry, there's this rule. There's nothing we can do about it. That in and of itself, that on the face of it, is a patent lie. It's a lie. They never do that. They've not done that, right? So they had a reason to do it. He wasn't duty-bound to do that, because the legislatures of many states have faced this before. In fact, Ohio, only in 2016, that was the only time that the conventions occurred for both parties before the 90-day window. They had to make exclusions in 2020. They had to make exclusions in 2012. In fact, earlier, like less than a couple months ago, it's such a common practice that Republicans did it in Alabama. Democrats did it in Washington. They've already made the exception. There's no contentiousness between the parties typically. So what does that tell us? That's a common practice to say, oh, even though we have this rule on the books, we're just going to let your party nominee be on the ballot because that's the way we want it to work. What they were really trying to do, as you said, is that they were trying to make it harder for funding to reach ballot initiatives that will bring people that were the minority party. In this case, in Ohio, it's Democrats. Republicans were trying to block Democrats from bringing a ballot initiative out that's gonna get more people to participate.
Yeah.
I've always considered, historically Ohio has been like the bellwether state, and you popped the bubble for me and you're like, not anymore. It's like I think you said it was like a plus 8 state. So it's nearing double digits in terms of the GOP majority, yet they're not getting their way on ballot initiatives that are popular for Democrats. So I don't mean to filibuster and speak too much,
No, right.
but I'll say one more thing here, that there was an investigative journalist in Ohio that asked the Republican senators, why are you trying to link this campaign financing rule to this common practice? What's the beef here about that abortion ballot? And so the official statement of the Republican response from the senators in Ohio was, a Swiss billionaire gave money to a DC nonprofit. That nonprofit gave money to an Ohio issue group. That Ohio issue group spent money on the Ohio campaign. And that, we have to stop this practice because it's harmful to democracy that non-citizens are participating, when in fact we know that, it was a smokescreen.
And I do want to correct myself. The issue 1 was last year, and they were responding to that. It was money that came in and got the abortion protected constitutionally last year. And so they're responding to that because a lot of money came in to pass it. And so they're trying to, prevent that from happening. I don't, there's of course going to be questions as to whether or not that's going to be constitutional. As preventing money. I mean, all for campaign finance reform, but I don't think you can discriminate against out-of-state contributions any more than you can discriminate against corporate contributions or anything else. I think they're going to have a hard time with that. I almost kind of hope for that because, boy, if that passes, man, we'll be passing all around the country, and then it's going to be interesting, because what if a corporation donates to a local, gives the money to a local subsidiary, and then it's distributed from then? I mean, this will be very interesting as to how it is enforced and how it works out. I give money to a relative and then they donate it. I mean, it's silly. So it's just, anyway, I mean, one of the ways that when we had the universal marriage bill back in 2008, the Mormon Church actually gave out chunks of money for the maximum, the donation at the time. I think it was 5,000. I think now limited to less than that per person. They gave out to members. We actually had a prominent attorney here who received some of that money and then gave that donation each person. Nothing illegal about it at that time. That's how they spread the money around to help defeat that measure, and it was defeated. I don't say that money is what made the difference, but that was in 2008. But you look at the campaign finance reports, you'll see a bunch of figures gave the maximum amount. Well, they're all Mormons. So it's, you got it. But this is in effect what they're trying to do is a version of campaign finance reform. And I think they were hoping to get some Democratic votes, with that by linking it to the ballot access bill. And Democrats didn't buy it. They didn't get one Democratic vote.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention earlier, or between the two of us, we didn't mention earlier, make it crystal clear that the Democrats, the senators within Ohio, called it out early, and the state senators, but also the federal, the national, Jamie Harrison from the House of Representatives. He was basically the spokesperson, I think, on behalf of the Democratic National Party. And he said, our party is going to do a roll call, virtual roll call, to make sure we're nominated. We don't need Republican support to identify who our candidate is for our election, and we don't need to wait until the convention. But you could picture, in part, it was also because maybe this is reading a little bit too much between the lines. There are very few people in Washington, D.C. that want to go down the line of arguing campaign finance reform on the merits. Because you see, the Ohio Republican Senator McCauley, he's one of the people that was most in front of this, and he was out there saying that I think he said participation in elections ought to be citizens of the U.S. only, and even Governor DeWine, he said, even though he thought that the whole thing was ridiculous, that they were trying to say, sorry, Biden and Harris can't be on the ballot. He called that an absurd situation. But he also said, and to kind of give some coverage to his colleagues in the Senate, from the GOP, he said that people would be surprised to hear that the practice that our senators are describing is currently legal in Ohio. Well, I don't think anybody's surprised. When you look at campaign finance in general, if you look at all the dark money in general, look at all the campaign contributions in general in the aggregate, I don't think very many people are surprised that money pools donate to campaigns.
Yeah. I just want to say, too, I bet behind the scenes, a lot of the Republican leadership was not happy with the Secretary of State. They did not want to go down that road and have a lot of Democrats going to the voting precinct or getting ballots that didn't have Biden on the ballot and facing that backlash, even from a lot of people who didn't support Biden. They did not want to deal with that. That would have been, that might have been more value to Biden's campaign than being on that ballot that he probably has very little chance of winning, right? It's like, they've gamed it against me. He accuses me of election interference. Look at him. And, you're going to say Trump wasn't involved? Yeah, he wouldn't say that. He would let other people's surrogates say that. But, it's just, that's it's just something there. They did not want to deal with that. I think they consider their person there to be a loose cannon, and they did an end around them. And I'm wondering what those backdoor meetings are right now, because he probably feels undermined.
Yeah, I think I'm interested. Like I said, I think it's really interesting that. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. The GOP senators in their efforts to try to keep money out of those campaigns. You would think that they would understand how much of their own money comes from these other places, right?
You would think.
Yeah. Maybe because they're at the state legislature level. But like I said, one of the Democratic senators said this is like the law that they just voted for is going to put harsh new restrictions on all their local campaigns. And I think he used like firefighters. If you want a ballot initiative, like a measure, we have measures here in our community on the North Coast in California that we're going to increase the tax by 0.5%, or we're going to have a new regulatory way of funding fire department, or like Measure T, and all these measures that come up where they're just trying to tinker with local political action. Well, sometimes we actually get outside money. Even here in our most recent assembly race, over $1 million, came into our community from LA-based organizations and other, people, allegedly from other people, outside the area. You would think that that it's hard to raise money that you wouldn't want to put in a block obstruction of this nature. So I don't know. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but it just doesn't seem like.
I don't know. It's probably before your time. I think about 20 years ago, we actually did pass a local measure that barred or limited donations from out-of-town corporations. It was struck down. And I knew it would be. It was obvious that it would be. And my problem with it was that it basically left us prey to in-town corporations, in-town rich people. We had no way of offsetting it. It was applied to unions and everything else. So it was just, that was, unless somebody got a big donation from one of the tribes, there was no way to offset it. But it was struck down, and that was one of the things. So it's just, at any rate, but it would have been. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this bill. If I assume it has to pass through the lower house as well. We'll see.
To be determined.
In an email sent by a Texas DPS trooper to a superior obtained by ABC News, one trooper writing, quote, "I believe we have stepped over a line into the inhumane." The trooper recounting a patrol where they came across a large group of migrants, including small children and babies, writing, quote, "We were given orders to push the people back into the water to go to Mexico." Adding, when they expressed concerns of exhaustion and drowning and contacted command, they were again, quote, "given the order to tell them to go to Mexico."
When you're looking at the wire, when you're looking at these floating devices, to be frank with you, that is a death trap. There is absolutely no consequence that would ever discourage desperate human souls who are willing to sacrifice their lives for the hope of the American dream.
Okay, well, the border bill that had been rejected by the Republicans in what was it, January or February? I think it was February. Pretty much the same bill with a few tweaks has been brought up again, and once again being rejected at the behest of Trump by the Republicans as inadequate because it's not strict enough. And not like they couldn't make it stricter later, right? You know, once they take power, take what you can get. But it has been rejected once again. And everybody knows the cynicism around it is they don't want Biden to claim a victory during the election season with regard to the border. They have a problem because the actual border crossings, at least as measured by the arrests, are down almost 50% since December. Something is going right. Abbott wants to take credit, but the problem with that is they're down in all four border states everywhere. They're actually highest right now in California, but that coming across San Diego, but that changes routinely. The routes change as all the time, and it could be New Mexico next time. It could go back to Texas the month after. So it's, but the fact of the matter is overall rates are down. So they've got that problem, but they're rejecting it again. And this time, however, several Democrats, Padilla, Cory Booker, are rejecting it because they say it's too strong. I have a feeling that's part of the Democratic strategy, is to say so that they can back up their claim that this is basically the Republican bill with a few minor concessions. And I wouldn't be surprised if they bring it up a third time in the fall before the election. It's intended to take a lot of steam out because right now the border is one of the strongest weapons that the Republicans have had in the campaign, though it seems to be easing off a little bit. It's not so much in the news as much, partly because it's eased off a bit lately. Biden actually has some kind of plan in mind that he's trying to sell to Mexico. Mexico's about to elect a new leader, probably the woman who is Mexico City's mayor. Who is actually a Jewish woman, could be the first one to be elected. A protege of Obrador, probably not going to be much change in policy, but apparently Biden has some kind of plan that he wants to work out with her. If it leads to a significant drop of illegal immigration, undocumented immigration by November, then he's going to be able to claim that as a success, and then they're going to have to turn to inflation, which the Republicans better hope continues until November. So they have rejected again. They're saying that it's a stunt. The Republicans are, which it is, but it's an effective stunt because the Republicans, this is their chance to get what they want. They probably won't get it. Even if they win the Senate, it'll probably be filibustered, the next time around. This is their chance to get it, and Trump is messing it up for them, because they can win all three branches and the Senate will filibuster it unless they can find a way to make it somehow a budget issue and so it's, So, we're here with these bizarre politics, and here we are, Dave.
So, thank you for that setup as always. My question for you, I mean, I don't want to need to turn it back around directly to a
Sure.
question, but I think maybe it'd be helpful in this instance. So in order for them to threaten the filibuster, basically, that means that they would say, hey, we're not going to let this get a vote unless we get 60 votes. So I think only one Republican went along with it. And that means that there's zero chance of it actually making it, even though it's got a whole grip of elements that Republicans would love to have in place. Because it's already been widely known that it would become the most sweeping reform of immigration in a very long time. Long needed reforms that many, like you said, many Democrats don't agree with. So literally, you could imagine that there would be Republican support for, at least in concept, like you said.
Well,
but
they would love to get this bill.
That's
if they were thinking about policy. I mean, they're going to kick themselves in the future, and they're going to blame Trump.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's literally that, right? So that's what I thought. I thought you were thinking that, like, this really is a Republican wish list in many ways.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. This would be a bill in the old days if they had the upper hand, if they, and they wanted to get around a Democratic filibuster. This would be the ideal bill, about the best that they could get if they had the upper hand. Here, the Democrats have the majority in the Senate, and they're handing it to them on a silver platter, but Trump feels like it would lessen his chances of winning, so it won't pass. I mean, that is bizarre.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, cool. So I'm glad we're on the same page. I just wanted to make sure. That's why I started with the question that, like, it really is what they would like to have. But it also has some things in there that Democrats would want too. So we could talk more about the bill itself.
Sure.
But because it's political stunt, well, let's talk a little bit more about that political stunt piece. So like you said, the Democrats putting this forward, maybe they're talking about doing it again and again, just to say, hey, by the way, look how hypocritical Republicans can be on an issue that they claim is one of the most important issues to them, and they get the credit to their base. They potentially, theoretically, look like they're taking the high ground, even though it's not comprehensive reform. I did hear Senator Schumer say, we are going to fight for comprehensive reform also, but we just want to show that there's nothing possible. Like, if the Republicans were going to do anything, they would do this. This proves they're doing nothing, right? So that's the reality of this back and forth in the Senate. But then the other piece of this too is that what are the Republicans saying? They need something to stand behind. So I did actually review a couple of different analysis, back for a prior show that we did about what's in the bill and is it really successful? Is it really helpful? Or are there challenges? And I don't think we have to go into misinformation and disinformation and how there are organizations that are called like Immigration Study, this Immigration Center for Study in America. I'm trying to think of the name of the one. I don't recall. Oh, the American Immigration Council did one analysis, and another one, the Center for Immigration Studies. So
you're talking about the right-wing groups?
Yeah, exactly.
They aren't what they claim to be, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't mean to disparage those two, but I'm just saying there are organizations that sound super legit that publish documents. And in particular, let's call it out, the Center for Immigration Studies is one that I just happen to have in front of me, where they go through line by line and they talk about how, this would never work. This is not what we want. These aren't the things that we want. When in fact, that's what the Republican senators negotiated in good faith and said these are the things that we would actually want. So let's just look at one example. Like I think it was like hiring 5,000 new immigration officers. And empowering them to make decisions on the ground, like first line decisions, to follow best practice in terms of whether people are reaching the country at the appropriate time, in the appropriate place, with the appropriate claims, and then kind of so that they're not just releasing 1 million people into the country with the hope that they show up one day in court, that we would actually give them some fast track adjudication. Well, they're saying, well, then the criticism obviously is, it's like I said, it's to a certain extent Kafkaesque. There's like a distortion of what the empowering people actually means. But then there's the other side of the criticism too, of saying like, well, if we actually did all these things, we wouldn't change the conditions on the ground because we're still potentially giving people the right to work here in the United States. And until we do, so in other words, they're saying like, if the only way we're going to pass, if Republicans could stand behind the claim, well, if we never give an immigrant who's waiting trial the capacity to work, then maybe we could agree to this bill. So it's almost like they found elements that they could interpret in a way that become like a poison pill. So, like I said, like last year, the numbers were threefold or fourfold, almost 4.5-fold the amount of people coming to this country. And it is an emergency situation that needs to be addressed. Yeah. But could we possibly find solutions in this political climate? I highly doubt it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, Senator Padilla also, he's not supporting it. He said, I was willing to vote for it as a bitter pill to get Ukraine aid because we're desperate for that. I'm not going to vote for this. He said it's too draconian. So he's making it real clear. And Mark Warner is saying, wow, look at, there's backlash here from progressives. That means it's actually a pretty, good bipartisan bill, it's like, and they're going to use that. They're going to use the ones, and this is also passed to allow for people like Tester and Brown and people in those vulnerable positions to be able to say, they tried on the border. This is, in those tough races, and also people like Gallego where in the border states, and possibly even forgetting the name of the guy in Texas who's running against Cruz now. To say that he endorses it. Again, though, I mean, I know that privately, Republicans who are into policy, I know there's a few of them left, are looking at this and saying, we're never going to get this bill again, ever. This is the best that they're going to get, and they're going to be screaming next year at Democrats, even if they win the Senate, the House, and the presidency. And they're going to be screaming at Democrats who are saying, you're vetoing the bill that you sponsored last year. And Democrats are going to say, yeah, so what? What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? You had a chance last year. You're the one who blew it. And that's, they'll never get this bill again. And that's just, that's the news of the day. Because they cannot stand up to Trump. And that is just sad for him. I'm glad. I mean, I would personally write Trump a letter because I think it's too draconian. I think that we need some major reform, and this isn't it. There are some elements, sure, but I'm glad it's not passing. And so are probably some of the Democrats who are voting for it. But this is the state, the ridiculous state of politics. If it had a serious chance of passing, there'd probably be more Democrats voting against it.
Yeah, I think that's right too. I think it was Colin Allred, the Democrat running for Senate in Texas. Yeah.
He would vote for it because he's an earnest moderate living on a border or, in a border state. That's his actual politics. And, that's fine. It's not the actual politics of a lot of the senators who are playing political games with it, but that's what you have to do in an election year. Sorry, that's.
Yeah. But by the same token, like you said, a moderate Senate candidate in Texas could, to a certain extent say, hey, if this is the best we could do, this is the best we could do. Increasing the detention beds by nearly double, increasing legal immigration for people with worker visas, making it easier for families to get together when you've got one person living and working here and you're trying to reunify families, getting a path for people who are, those dreamers, like if there are people who are already here, already working, they've lived here their whole life, making it a little bit easier for them to have a path towards legitimate, not that it's legitimate or illegitimate, but a green card, the right to work, the actual right to work and be here. The fact that we can't have conversations, like if somebody's been here 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, living, working, gone to school, has a job, never committed a crime, there probably should be a category for that, right? As opposed to, and I know we just have a couple minutes left. Let's contrast that to some of the claims that Trump's been making on the campaign trail about how it's going to be the most massive roundup of people who are undocumented and exporting them, it would be the worst human rights event in American history, and it's somewhat popular amongst Trump's base. So you can understand maybe why Republicans are they're steering clear of getting in between Trump and the presidency.
The point though is the Democrats, all those things you just listed, the Democrats will get that and more next year, or there won't be a bill. It won't pass. That's the thing. So they don't need to get that this year. I mean, they don't need to have that in this bill. They will get that, or there won't be a bill passing next year, even unless the Republicans somehow get more than 60 senators. I mean, it's just not going to happen. This was the moment that they could have had it, and they can't have it because Trump, and because they can't stand up to Trump.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
Okay, that brings us to predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
So as we covered last week, Justice Alito has been accused of an ethical breach, making a political statement on matters before the court associated with flying flags at two of his homes, widely believed to indicate bias in favor of Donald Trump and his supporters' claims that the 2020 election was fraudulent, and also that he's in favor of a movement that believes in a conservative, biblical-centered government. This is no small vice, according to the critics. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Durbin and Senator Whitehouse have called for him to recuse himself from the two pending January 6 cases regarding the breach of the Capitol, including one that is addressing the potential presidential immunity for Donald Trump alleged crimes. But for his part, Alito says that these were his wife's choices. They were within her discretion as a joint owner of their homes. And in any case, these are not grounds for recusal. He said that, I'm going to paraphrase, a reasonable person who's not motivated by political or ideological considerations or a desire to affect the outcome of the court case could conclude this doesn't meet the standards for a recusal. So I'm not going to recuse myself. That's basically what he said. My prediction is that while the court's reputation will continue to face severe challenges, the upcoming ruling on presidential immunity will strike a balance that avoids overt constitutional crisis by reaffirming that official acts are immune from prosecution while leaving room for accountability and liability for non-official acts.
Well, actually, there's a lot of pressure on Roberts to put pressure on Alito about this. So who knows what is going to happen ultimately in that. But a few blocks from the Trump trial is Bob Menendez's trial. Hasn't gotten as much press coverage, but it really hasn't been going well for Bob Menendez. I will be talking about this a little bit more in a future show, but for now, I'm just going to predict that Bob Menendez is going to be found guilty as charged. I can't predict the Trump trial at this point. I'm just saying right now I'm leaning towards the prosecution, but that could change at a moment's notice based on what the jurors are doing. But I think Bob Menendez, I think he's going down. We'll find out soon enough. I could be totally wrong on that, and there's still time left for it to turn around for him. But until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.